There is panic in Europe as dissident right wing parties make gains in European elections. And we're going to look at today the different instances of these in a few major countries. First of all, in France, national rally under Jordan Bardella and Marine Le Pen have doubled the vote of Emmanuel Macron's party. So the national rally has a substantial uh, um, victory over Macron's party, the Renaissance Party, which had previously destroyed both left wing and right wing parties in France under a centrist party platform, mainly globalist and pro immigration, pro European Union, and the National Rally is the complete opposite. And because of that, the president of France has dissolved the parliament and called for a snap election. And this election is predicted to lose, or for Macron's party to lose a majority to the National uh, Rally Party under Marine Le Pen. Now, Marine Le Pen's party won't have an absolute majority. At least that's what they're predicting at the moment. But things will change. Markets responded drastically to this with a large drop on stock markets, as well as a drop in the value of the euro. So, which makes sense. A lot of these organizations, a lot of these sort of markets, and the the um, the currencies are linked very closely with centrist governments, liberal governments, uh, sort of mainstream right wing governments. And the National Rally Party is very different from that, very much an anti immigration party. And that is the trend amongst European elections this time around, very anti immigration. Um, and this shows also in Germany, the left wing parties took a severe hit. They lost a total of 11 seats, which includes the Social Democratic Party and the Greens. Both lost different number of seats, but a total they lost 11. The AFD, which is I think it's the alternative for Germany party, which is considered to be the more populist right wing party compared to the Christian Democrats. The AFD gained 6 seats and has now become the party in second place, which means it's kind of crazy to think that the first two parties are both supposed right wing parties. Now, I think most people in voting for AFD would consider that the Christian Democrats aren't very right wing, since they basically oversaw mass immigration under what was her name? The Germans' Iron Lady, who will never die. I can't remember what her name was, but anyway, so her party, they form the who currently, the current government is led by the Christian Democrats, and they have been for a long time, and they've overseen the destruction of society in Germany because of immigration, attacks by Muslims, and chaos and such, and that has created a backlash. And this is coming through the AFD, and it's interesting that the left wing parties are not gaining any ground because of this. Now, along in Belgium, the Prime Minister's party, the Liberal Party, got less than 7% in the European elections. And he was so embarrassed, and he resigned in disgrace. the Flemish nationalists and anti-immigration parties have come out to become dominant. So I don't know if the Flemish nationalists are either left wing or right wing. I would assume right wing, given nationalism, the opinion of sort of the elite, the opinion of the elite on nationalism in general. But the anti-immigration parties actually were supposed to be more dominant, but the Flemish nationalists held on. And I think nationalism nowadays it makes sense in some sense going into European elections, because if you're thinking, okay, I want to vote for something that is good for me in the European Parliament. Okay, I want somebody that is thinking first about me. If I was, a person in Belgium, maybe I'd want a nationalist. Theoretically, that's kind of the idea. But you may not want to. People might not vote as much for nationalists in the country's local elections, or national elections, I should say. In Hungary, the Viktor Orban's party held on to a sizable majority against a party making allegations of corruption. Now, this seems to be a trend of an attack against many right wing governments that actually, mostly provide right wing agenda, right wing uh, rule, opposed to something like the Conservative Party in Britain, which hasn't had, anything conservative about it necessarily. Which we'll get to that in a little bit, but the, uh, this party is this alternative party, which I don't think is necessarily a left wing party. It has members that broke off from the main Orban party and is making accusations of corruption. And I don't know how, whether that's true or not, whatever. It doesn't matter to me exactly, but this is what's going on. And similar attacks were made against the Polish Law and Justice Party, and that led to the Polish Law and Justice Party losing its power, and losing it to the left wing party. So this is how many right wing governments get taken down. So it will be interesting to see if Viktor Orban and his party will maintain power in the future, and that will be interesting to see. In Ireland, nothing big necessarily came out of the European elections, though local elections also took place. The one thing in the European elections seemed that Sinn Féin has lost a lot of support, so it'll be interesting to see where in the future that the people who usually voted for Sinn Féin will go. I imagine there are some other right wing parties coming up as more populist anti-immigration parties that are becoming much more popular. And this was shown also in local elections. Many anti-immigration politicians on the local level were elected. So this is pretty interesting for Ireland. And so nothing necessarily for Europe totally, but Ireland is definitely becoming more anti-immigration, and they are incredibly unhappy with their government, which was shown by the two referenda that took place not too long ago. So now it's interesting because the UK left. The UK Brexited. Brexit was a big deal for a long time. It took a while for them to actually leave the European Union. But at the same time that European parties on the right wing are becoming much more visible, much more competitive, possibly going to overthrow through elections, obviously, overthrow the opposition, the centrist parties, the so-called conservative parties, or the leftist parties. It just it depends on the situation, obviously. Such things as sort of the centrists with Macron, or uh, the Liberal Party in Belgium, or even the Christian Democrats in Germany. All these are examples of the right wing confronting the dominant faction or the dominant party in their nation, and you know, pushing for possible change in government. Just as this is happening in Europe, the UK is possibly going to elect its biggest majority of a left wing government. Now, I don't think this has anything to do with sort of right wing or left wing necessarily. It is purely because of the structure of the system. It's first past the post. It's not proportional elections. So therefore, if right wing parties, if you quote unquote right wing parties. I know a lot of people would say that the Conservative Party is not really right wing, though I think you could argue there are some politicians within the Conservative Party that are right wing. They're just not represented by the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. If you took the party, if you took if you took the right wing parties, and maybe they'd come up with, I don't know, 45% of the vote. If you combine reform and conservative parties together, they'll get a sizable amount of the vote. And you wouldn't think that would be like a major shift necessarily. But because of first past the post, if the Conservative Party continues to remain, which ironically, because they left the European Union, but remain competing with the Reform Party, because people have given up, or most people, except for, oddly enough, Peter Hitchens, who used to be for destroying the Conservative Party, but now is trying to get people to save the Conservative Party. Quite bizarre, I would say. But part of this is that the Conservative Party will basically, um, with its sort of dying breaths, will make sure that Labor has a large majority. And if it, even if the Conservative Party gets 0 seats necessarily, which a lot of people are pushing for, and I'm very sympathetic to that. And if I were in their situation, I'd probably be advocating the same thing, though. Though many other people think that Labor will actually be less left wing than the Conservative Party, though I don't know if that's going to be true. It will be interesting, because if Labor gets in with such a large majority, how will they interact with Europe? They were, kind of the Remain party, and somewhat. I mean, it was more complicated than that. But if they represent more of the Remain view, will they want to remain in extremely, or what they would consider extremely, right wing Europe? It just seems a little bizarre for them to then be put in that situation. So it'll be really interesting to see what they do. Will they be diplomatic? I mean, left wing, Labor, these types of organizations, the smart ones are extremely pragmatic. So maybe they will be very friendly with the politicians and the European politicians that they supposedly abhor, if they that they would never want to talk to previously. Like one of the most popular politicians in the Netherlands, who got a large percent of the vote, Geert Wilders, was prevented from entering the UK by the last Labour government a while back. And, they more or less, you know, attacked Giorgia Meloni as well. So, and probably Viktor Orban. But if Marine Le Pen is president of France, within the next few years or something like that, or AFD takes over in Germany, what will they do? Will they become an anti-European party? Will they, and if Trump becomes president of the United States, how will they deal with that? It will be quite interesting. As I said, they can be very pragmatic. And I bet somebody like Academic Agent would say that they probably will be. They will be In some ways, way more right wing than the Conservative Party. Though that's not very hard. That's the whole reason people want 0 seats for the Conservative Party, because they actually want somebody who's could be actually worth their existence, and that clearly has not been the Conservative Party. I mean, mass migration is increased massively under their government. So I'm not surprised that Labor is looking to sort of sweep, but not really sweep, but you know what I mean, come out with a massive majority. But at the same time, Europe is becoming very right wing populist, I guess you could say. You know, uh, Not necessarily all of them right wing populists, even if they are some of them right wing. I don't. It's hard to sometimes determine whether or not some of these organizations are populist or just you know what they really need to do is somehow um, put together a new elite to rule. Anyways, it will be interesting to see what happens in a world where if Europe actually becomes much more right wing than it is today. But I think people should lower their hopes a bit, because I've looked at some of the politicians that are running for the national rally in France. A lot of these people are still willing to accept, stuff like gay marriage. Like they're not that radical of, and in this, they're radical. They'd probably be radical, towards a left degree in maybe the 80s, but they're not, but they're considered radical right wingers now. It's just absolutely insane. So we'll see what happens. And if you want me to keep up with sort of more European politics or just politics in general, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Let me know in the comments if you want this to continue. Thank you, everyone. God bless.